I just wanted to talk today about the system involving GDV, gas discharge visualization, and EPI, electrophotonic imaging, and why it's a method that I've been discussing more recently. I've actually been researching this for, I don't know, about 5 years now. When I was first going through a lot of the archives at the Freedom of Information Act library at CIA.gov, where I found a whole series of articles that referenced Kirlian photography. And most of these articles are written closer to the early 70s, somewhere in the 80s, but most were close to the early 70s and involved research that had happened decades before and were more or less summaries of things that they were concerned about relative to politics and the Cold War, meaning to say that this was intelligence that they were gathering about the Soviets, the Russians, relative to what they knew about biofields and what they understood about electromagnetic fields and scalar technology, and also what they knew about energetics as a general field. America at the time did not have that sophisticated of a knowledge of energetics. I would argue that that maintains to this day. Um, and that's kind of a problem that we have. And so, what piqued my interest was just the sheer number of articles that had been declassified. And so today, beyond just showing you, I've shown you recently like the camera itself. I've given you some demos on it and why I'm interested in it. But I wanted to show you folks that this is not something that I'm interested in merely because of whatever. It's not just because I think it's cool or it's visually impactful. There's a whole series of documents that back this up as to why it's a relevant method and why even today there would be reasons to suppress it, just because simply that there's groups that would prefer to do things involving human energy concepts differently than the direction that others in the world are, which is to say that many of us have learned that we would like to go into the positive spectrum of energy, and we don't wish to engage in sort of the negative energetics, which is a way of, I guess you could say, of using psychoenergetics and psychotronic signatures and behaviors and weaponry devices, scalar technology to change the behaviors of larger populations in ways that are nearly undetectable to them individually. These are very subtle changes, and it's in the field of psychotronics. But there's also things that you can discuss as far as people's biofields and energetics that can validate the human biofield and why it's important for behavior to be changed relevant to human energy concepts. And so I don't want to get too deep into that concept except just to show you and just read to you some of the things that I've seen here personally that are compelling. So this is from the Controlled Offensive Behavior document that the Defense Intelligence Agency released in 1972. I will put all the document numbers in the description, but reading from page 33, part 6, it says, as mentioned above, the Soviets seem preoccupied with the search for the energy that carries or facilitates telepathy transmission. Is it electromagnetic or not? The search for this unknown energy has led the Soviets to Kirlian photography, named after its inventors Semyon and Valentina Kirlian. The Kirlians developed a technique of photographing with a high-frequency electrical field involving a specially constructed high-frequency spark generator tuned up and down between 75 to 200,000 electrical oscillations per second. Their first photographs showed turquoise and reddish-yellow patterns of flares coming out of specific channels within leaves. A magnified picture of a finger showed craters of lights and flares. By the 1960s, research on bioluminescence revealed by Kirlian photography was going on in many Soviet universities. Perfected techniques of photographing the play of high-frequency currents on humans, plants, and animals, as well as on inanimate matter, have set the Soviets on some striking discoveries about the energetic nature of man. Bioplasma is a term coined by the Soviets for bioluminescent phenomenon or energy. Scientists at the Kazakh State University at Alma-Ata have found the illnesses tend to show up in advance as a disordered play of flares from the bioplasma long before they manifest in the physical body. According to Ostrander and Schroeder, the Soviets may be attempting to link Kirlian photography with computers, among many other things, to instantly analyze the spectra of colors appearing in the varicolored flares from the living body. Effectively, folks, what I'm explaining to you here is that's exactly the system that I'm using. It is linking computers to Kirlian Photography to analyze the spectras of colors in the living body. And that's what you see in this illustration. And you can't see it here, but they actually had them in the declassified documents, an example of it. I just wanted that there for historical context so you could see it. But then we go on to page 35, and it says, it is believed that if there is any positive basis for Kirlian photography in the bioplasma body of humans, the Soviets may be closer than is thought on the controlled use of the Apport techniques and possible astral projection phenomenon. Very important to understand, folks, because it demonstrates that there's a scientific basis behind the link between plasma, bioplasma, the biofield, what we exist in as physical matter versus, other more esoteric concepts of the plasma field. This is a validation of that what occurs within the plasma field, your thoughts become things aspect relative to your bioelectrical field, are extremely relevant, okay? Especially when it comes to the field of psychotronics and how your behavior changes relative to frequency. So part 8 says, Dr. Podshabyakin, excuse me for my pronunciation, an electrophysiologist at the Institute of Clinical Physiology in Kiev, has found that by charting acupuncture points, a correlation exists between the bioplasma and changes on the surface of the sun. At the exact moment solar flares, sunspots occur, there are changes in the electrical potential of the skin's acupuncture points. These electrical charges are measured by a toboscope, probably a simple Wheatstone bridge device. In some way, the bioplasma of the body is sensitive to these solar explosions of the instant they occur, even though it takes about 2 days for the cosmic particles to reach the Earth. So again, suggesting that the humans respond to the geomagnetic conditions created by the sun and the moon, full moon madness, right? All these things involving psychoenergetics. Are we impacted by the moon? What is it that does that? Well, that's an electromagnetic effect, folks. I mean, think about it. It's geomagnetic in nature. They're demonstrating that when the sun changes, the moon's conditions change, so do geomagnetic conditions, and as a result, so does the electrical field in the body. You can literally, you would have to take that into account if you are measuring your biofield to understand, like, am I changing my biofield relevant to the geomagnetic conditions? Is there a full moon? Is the sunset? I mean, all of those things would matter as well as where you are geographically. Part 9. The most significant use of Kirlian photography is in the area of psychokinesis, or mind over matter. Dr. Gennady Sergeyev of the A.A. Ukhtomsky Military Institute in Leningrad believes Kirlian photography may uncover the mechanism of PK. Sergeyev is a prominent mathematician for the Soviet military who works closely with an electrophysiologist from the University of Leningrad, Dr. L. Pavlova. Sergeyev has devised important mathematical and statistical methods for analyzing EEG electroencephalograph, which allowed parapsychologists to follow and depict the actions of telepathy in the brain. The type of work reported by Sergeyev in 1967 and 1968 is just now beginning to appear in the U.S. efforts to understand the transmissions of telepathy. Sergeyev has conducted several years of intensive lab research on the outstanding PK psychic in Leningrad, Nina Kulagina. Illustration 4 is a photograph of Dr. Sergeyev, and illustration 5 is a photograph of Ms. Kulagina. Sorry, I don't have the photographs here. They're not, you can't see them. They don't appear on the document. Sergeyev registered heightened biological luminescence radiating from Kulagina's eyes during the apparent movement of objects by PK. Sergeyev postulates that the bioplasma of the human body must interact with the environment to produce PK. Sergeyev emphasizes when target objects are placed in a vacuum, Kulagina is unable to move them. Barkas in the United States reports some unusual occurrences during psychic photography, especially of the eyes. Reportedly, Kulagina has caused the movement of wide range of non-magnetic objects under strict scientific control: large crystal bowls, clock, pendulums, bread, matches, etc. In one test, a raw egg was placed in a salt solution inside a sealed aquarium 6 feet away from her. Researchers report she was able to use PK to separate the yolk from the white of the egg. Observations by Western scientists of Mrs. Kulagina's PK ability has been reported with verification of her authentic ability. The same Western scientists have reported that as of February 1971, they have not been able to visit or observe her. A veil of secrecy has been placed on her and Mrs. Kulagina for unknown reasons. Rather than simply observing PK, the Soviets typically turned to instrumentation. I'm trying to think if I should read this part here, guys. I think I'm going to go on to the next part here because this is deviating a little bit from the core topic of Kirlian photography. But I wanted you to see that, folks, because you can see there's a connection between psychokinesis and the electrical flow, geomagnetism relative to your bioelectrical field, and how these things are quantified and measured, okay? And why are these things here in the West typically, concealed to this day, folks? I mean, this was written 1971, it's 2021 here. Let's think this through a little bit. 50 years later, and we're still hiding this in the West for the most part. I mean, yeah, I have one, but how many people know about it? Okay, moving on to a new document here. This is from a completely separate one that I located that's called Articles X and Y from an Unidentified Journal. I'll put the document number here. This just gets into what the Soviets knew about Kirlian photography. And again, this is a separate document, getting on to another one. R. Stepanov, Doctor of Medical Sciences Professor. Discharges are diagnosed. Correct diagnosis of a malignant tumor may be given only if during the operational... Hang on really quick here. I want to make sure I have this. Okay. Yeah, let's just start here. So it says, since 1967, work has been going on in the surgery department of the Kuban Medical Institute on the utilization of high often frequency photography for the diagnosis of precancerous states and cancerous tumors of the stomach. Together with ST Kirlian and V Kirlian, a procedure has been developed for obtaining high often frequency photographs of sections of some tissues taken from patients that are being operated on. In order to compare the results obtained by the Kirlian method with other methods, we carried out simultaneous histological and histochemical investigations of these same sections. The results of the investigations convinced us the fact that a clearly defined difference exists between high often frequency images of normal and cancerous tissue. The principal advantage of the new method compared with well-known methods is in its expeditious nature. However, because of the cancerous tissue can be photographed immediately after the operation and therefore does not have the time to change significantly, it is possible to study the physiochemical properties of this tissue under the conditions close to the conditions in the living organism. According to the characteristics of the channel of the high often frequency discharge, their geometry and energetic for a deviation from the norm, one may evaluate not only the extent of the tumor process, but also the dynamics of the malignant growth. And this is of a very great significance in precise diagnosis and consequently in the therapy of cancer. And then it goes on to say, no author listed. The principal distinguishing feature of photographing in a field of high often frequency current is this is basically, when they say high often frequency current, they're discussing GDV Kirlian photography. What I'm discussing here is a method. There is also no need in illuminating the object during the photographing process. Therefore, it is very convenient to use the Kirlian method to obtain photographs of surfaces to photograph by means of conventional camera. They proposed a special elastic electrode with a light-sensitive layer deposited on its surface. This simple device may be inserted into any cavity in a contracted state. It is then filled with a current-conducting liquid and connected for a short time to a high-often frequency oscillator. It allows that one can obtain a latent image of the entire inner profile of the cavity on the light-sensitive layer. The electrode, after having been removed from the water and retracted from the cavity, is again filled with the same quantity of liquid, developed and fixed. The three-dimensional photograph that is obtained provides a possibility of detailed evaluation of the electrical state of any spot on the investigated surface. So again, this is just kind of giving you a broad overview of Kirlian photography as a method. Leading on to the next page, bioenergetics and Kirlian photography, an original healing method, biostimulation with a beam from a low, often powered laser, has been developed at the Kazakh State University by the Doctor of Biological Science in Yushin and his associates. Hypertension, bronchial asthma, and other illnesses that are difficult to treat can be treated successfully by this method. For a rapid evaluation of this physiological state of patients under laser biostimulation, natives of Alma-Ata have developed a special installation whose principle of operation is based on the Kirlian effect. The bioenergetic processes in the entire organism, when it is acted on by various physical factors, are evaluated quantitatively on the graphs. A new express method for evaluating the physiological state of a person was used not only in medicine but also in biology. What are the interesting facts that biologists have been able to discover? It turned out that the intensity of the luminescence is maximal in young plant leaf and minimal in old ones. And at the instant a leaf is torn off, an abrupt flare of luminescence followed by a rapid attenuation is observed. However, if a plant is placed in a constant magnetic field, then the luminescence intensity decreases, while the duration of the attenuation increases by a factor of 2-3. Under these conditions, the effect of the reduction of luminescence as a result of the reaction of a magnetic field is preserved for a long time, even in a case when a magnet no longer acts on the living tissue. It is the expressed evaluation of the bioenergetic state of living organism is not only the advantage which attracts biologists and physiologists to the Kirlian effect. The new phenomenon which have been discovered still await their explanation. And so then they give you a series of articles to read. And then I'm going to leave you with this last one here. It's just sort of a general article that they were studying because they were concerned, obviously, about what the Soviets had as an edge at the time, being the Cold War. And so they were collecting all this information and keeping it in their archives. And so this one kind of gives you a general history of Kirlian photography. And it says this wide range of comment concerns a novel photographical process is now stirring controversy among American scientists. Kirlian photography, invented in 1939 by Russian researchers Semyon and Valentina Kirlian and introduced to the United States 3 years ago, produces startling photographs of pulsating multicolored lights streaming from the human body and from plants. Psychologists, psychiatrists, biologists, and physicists, as well as investigators of psychic phenomenon, are looking into Kirlian photography, also known as radiation field photography, as a new way of observing energy fields associated with living organisms. Unusual experiments are being performed throughout the United States and Russia, with remarkable claims being made, many based on little information and attained under loosely controlled experimental conditions. However, reputable American scientists are now attempting to improve testing conditions to better evaluate the phenomenon involved. The subject poses frustrating pitfalls for anyone attempting an objective and independent evaluation. Little of the research has been published in the traditional scientific literature, and only a relatively small number of scientists have first-hand knowledge of it. Those who are experimenting often seem to disagree on even the most basic points, and a certain amount of verbal gobbledygook by some of those who have described experiments or presented theories has made it difficult to sort out the legitimate scientific aspects from more metaphysical matters. Nevertheless, there seems to be enough to the subject to merit some serious attention. The Kirlians report that their electrophotographs show certain points on the human body radiating light flares more forcibly than the areas around them, and that these points correspond exactly to the 741 acupuncture points mapped out by the ancient Chinese. It is also reported that they have produced photographs showing that a plant is diseased before the physical symptoms of the disease appear. Soviet investigator Viktor Adamenko, who has worked with the Kirlians for many years, claims that he has been able to cut off as much as 10% of a leaf and still produce a photograph that shows light emanating not only from the portion of the leaf remaining, but also from the missing section. Adamenko suggests that there are so many energy sources in a leaf that cutting a small section away does not significantly reduce the ability of the leaf to maintain its energy pattern. American scientists have been unable to obtain the same result. In the United States, material scientist William A. Tiller of Stanford University and medical psychologist Thelma Moss of the University of California in Los Angeles have produced photographs of freshly plucked leaves, revealing light patterns surrounding the leaves that become distorted if the leaves are mutilated and gradually disappear as the leaves die. They speculate that this emanation may be a direct measure of the life processes occurring within living organisms. Repeated experiments suggest that light emanations around fingertips vary with the emotional, physiological, and psychic state of the person being photographed. Moss has photographed the fingertips of a medical student before, during, and after the consumption of 17 ounces of bourbon. The emanations around his fingertips became increasingly brighter and rosier after each consecutive drink until he became all lit up, and shortly thereafter, ill. This experiment has been repeated by Tiller and psychiatrist Gerald J. Jampolsky of the Child Center in Kentfield, California. Their results corroborate those of Moss, whose more puzzling are photographs taken of fingers of faith healers, persons who claim that they can cure illness by touching others. Often the person being treated by a healer reports a heat sensation in the area of the body touched. Pictures taken by Moss show that the glow around the healer's fingers is smaller than before healing, while the patient's emanations increase in size and intensity after healing. It should be emphasized, he says, that this phenomenon does not demonstrate healing. It simply seems to reveal a transfer of energy from healer to patient. This is but a small sample of Kirlian photography experiments going on in the United States, Russia, and to a lesser degree in England and South America. The simplicity and inexpensiveness of the Kirlian apparatus has encouraged experimentation by bona fide and amateur scientists alike. In general, the American photographic devices are modeled after the Russian ones but differ from one another in power source and experimental range of voltage and frequency used. In the simplest Kirlian device, the object to be photographed is placed on film between two metal plates to which voltage is applied. For taking pictures of a portion of the human body, only one electrode metal plate is needed, since the body acts as a ground. In other cases, a transparent electrode is used and the film is placed outside the apparatus in a camera. Often a Tesla coil is used with the device. It is plugged into an electrical outlet and in turn rigged to the metal plates. The Tesla coil multiplies the voltage and the frequency of the electrical field. If the current is of high frequency, it travels over the surface of objects rather than through them and is thus safer to work with. The exposure time depends on the film speed and the strength of the discharge current. When the current is tuned on in a darkened room, rays of light are readily seen issuing from the object's edges. The light is recorded by the film. Radiation field photography is not a new discovery. It dates as far back as Nikola Tesla, the inventor of the Tesla coil. With the coil, he made photographs showing sparks emanating from various parts of his body. At the turn of the century, an American and a Czech physicist also experimented with electrophotography. Again, in the 1930s, American physicists studied corona discharge. However, little attention was paid to these photographs until the Kirlians accidentally rediscovered the process. Most earlier scientists felt that they were dealing purely with a corona discharge. The Kirlians were the first to consider the patterns of luminescences as life activities. In Living Things, the Kirlians wrote, we see the signals of the inner state of the organism reflected in the brightness, dimness, and color of the flares. The inner life activities of the human being are being written in these light sorry guys, there's a little bit of a cutoff here, hieroglyphic. And in order to write these hieroglyphs, to read them, we're going to need help. Sorry, it's cut off, so hieroglyphs, I think is what they're saying. American interest in radiation photography was triggered 3 years ago by appearance of the book Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain by Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder. They've also been quoted in the Defense Intelligence Agency report. So let me see here. I think we covered most of the relevant material here. Let's see. All right, guys, so I'm going to leave the rest of these documents up for you to review, and I'll put the entire thing up here. I'm trying to think if there's another section here that you may find relevant yeah, okay. Here's another part I think that I'm just going to skip to the middle of this next part here. It says, Richard Miller, a physicist and director of research at the Department of Paraphysics and Parapsychology at the Experimental College in Seattle, is not convinced Air ionization is the main process in Kirlian photography. He thinks the radiations are related to normal discharge of gas from living organisms. With photospectrometry, Miller and his colleagues have looked at the emission lines coming off human body and have identified them as gases related to the phenomenon of pheromones, gases that contain communication signals like odors. Guys, now we're getting into gases that contain communication signals. Okay, that's biofields, that's bioplasma, that's everything I've been talking about. Now you're getting into concepts involving the collective consciousness and the biointernet. That's just my additions there. Okay, so much human emotional interaction could depend on the exchange of pheromones, says Miller. Of course, this goes on at a subliminal level, below the level of conscious awareness. Gas emissions are functions of the emotional state and are potential clues to what goes on inside the head, and may lead to accurate measure of human response and health state. The Kirlian process gives us a handle to measure these states, concludes Miller. Both he and Tiller agree that careful experimentation under well-controlled conditions is needed to evaluate the significance of this phenomenon. All right, and that's most of that document. I didn't want to read the entire thing, guys, because I mean it's pretty long, but I got through most of that there. All right, so let's go through the rest of this here. It says, whatever it is, Moss says, I'm interested in it because it reveals enormous differences in energy states in individuals, and thus may have practical applications for treating diseases, alcoholics, for psychotherapy, and for studying the discovery of Kirlian photography to be as important as the invention of the X-ray machine. X-rays show what goes on inside the human body. Kirlian photography reveals what goes on outside the body. I'm so glad this says that, guys, because I've been talking about the human body as a trinity of human energy. That you have the skeletal structure, that's what the X-ray covers. You have your physical body on the outside, so you have your physical non-visible, that's X-ray, that's what's going on inside. You have your physical visible, that's what's covered everything by your normal doctor and what you normally address. But what happens to your biofield? What about your aura? It's relevant because it speaks to what's going on internally. It speaks to what's going on inside your body, okay? And so if you learn more about this biofield, if you learn more about this discharge, then yes, you're going to learn more about what's happening inside the body because it all vibrates down in as much as it goes out. Do you understand? It's a transmit and receive pathway that's going on here with this biofield, and you need to know what goes on in both directions. So ending this document, it says, Jampolsky is planning to take photographs of fingertips of children to see if he can determine when a child is daydreaming or actually concentrating on his books. He's also planning to do some work with dying patients to find out how long emanations continue after death and if the photographs will reveal when a patient makes the unconscious decision to stop living. Kirlian studies of persons in a hypnotic state show that unconscious decisions do affect the aura. Researchers James Hickman and Larry Amos of Sonoma State College in New Mexico are planning to take photographs of fingertips of normal and abnormal persons at a nearby mental hospital. Preliminary studies with Kirlian photography, Hickman says, indicate that it is possible to detect emotional disturbances. Says Moss, at this moment in time, it is impossible to draw any conclusions about this research except one. Whatever these pictures reveal, corona discharge or bioplasma, the changes which have been observed to occur in organic materials demonstrate that a most interesting, still undeciphered story is being told. And there lies the challenge. All right, so that I wanted to kind of finish on, folks. I know that's a lot of documentation. I've been going on for almost a half hour here, but you really, I'm gonna end with some charts here. I'm gonna kind of show you some things that I've learned in studying this. That everything that you just saw, and I've been using this camera for a little while now, about a month and a half, I'd say I've had this thing, and I am absolutely convinced that the Kirlian gas discharge method is valid. That it has definitely some tangible data points. The whole reason why I've been even considering this method from the beginning was because I found all of this documentation on the CIA.gov's library and the Freedom of Information Act library. And I can give you all the documents numbers here. I'll put everything so you can locate it yourself. You can do your own research on your own. But yeah, I'll remind folks here, if you're interested in this method, I am available to do these types of measurements. And you know, if you're just curious about it, you can inquire The descriptions are down there below. You can contact me. But yeah, for me, I don't buy into anything. I don't accept anything as a concept unless I've researched it for a long time. And what compels me about this is that it's just been so suppressed. It seems to have been so pushed back and marginalized. You see them kind of saying that it doesn't work on Wikipedia, or that it's, like, well, we don't really know. Well, guys, I mean, is that true? Do you honestly believe that? Knowing that I found this documentation where you see the Defense Intelligence Agency was concerned, you see the CIA, the Army, they were all writing like report after report that have been declassified now, saying that we got to know what's going on with this Kirlian photography, you guys. There's something really huge here. We really got to figure this out. Well, there you go, guys. I mean, it is. It's very relevant. Your biofield is relevant. What you do with your biofield is relevant. And, these things are all important to keep in mind. You have a trinity of human energy. Please keep this in mind, okay? You have your physical non-visible, your skeletal structure, your physical visible, and you have your biofield. And this is the part that I'm wanting us to focus more and concentrate on. I'm available if you would like to learn more about this or to consult with me. Again, my details are in the description below. You can email me and contact me about this. But I really think this is a fascinating field of study. And if you're interested in learning more, please contact me and we can talk. Have a good day.